Heyo everyone, this is AstridTheHorrorGirl and this is Press Start to Scream, back with another podcast, this time with the amazing, inspiring, and wonderful Nixuss. Very excited to talk with you.
I'm so excited to be here. One of my favorite creators ever. One of the biggest names in horror for me. So thank you for having me.
I'm one of the biggest names in horror too.
Are you joking me? From Resident Evil 7, from my first stream, yes. You've been one of my biggest horror inspirations.
I feel unworthy of this honor, but thank you.
Take it!
On the note of Resident Evil 7, let's get right into the fact that it's been a while, I feel, since you've played a game with the profile of Resident Evil. Because one time you told me that your vibe was the short indie horror games that are out there on Steam, and you play so many of them. There's no shortage of them.
Right. Yeah, it definitely has become kind of all-consuming, this ritual of going on Steam and checking new and trending and Googling and scouring the internet for these little, in essence, no-name horrors. But they do have, oftentimes, a cult following and very passionate developers. And I just find that the indie horror scene is a lot more welcoming and a lot warmer, in a sense, than a lot of the AAA titles. While I do enjoy Resident Evil when they come out, or those big name games, I just feel more fulfilled when I play these little indie horrors. They have a lot more quirks than the bigger games do.
I can see that. I can definitely see that. When I see a lot of those games played, there's some that you get really, really into, and then there's the ones where it seems more like frustration than the horror that should be there. And this isn't to dunk on indie games or titles or anything, but I think one of the reasons that a lot of people aren't brave enough, or rather I should say motivated enough, to go digging through all of the Steam indie games out there is they feel like there's a lot of swings and misses out there. What is your experience with finding diamonds in the rough?
Oof. I would definitely say while reviews can be super helpful, you don't really know the vibe and how much you're going to connect to a game until you're in it. I like to try everything. And while there are a lot of really good hidden gems that just fuel a fire in my horror little heart, there are definitely a couple titles that do, and I won't lie, feel like chores. It feels like, the game is just so unfinished and there's so many breakable bugs and glitches, and you can definitely tell when someone isn't having a good time, and I won't try to mask that. And as much as you want to, support developers and the journey that they're on, you never really want to sugarcoat those kind of things anyways. Because if you're playing a game and you're not having fun with it because of XYZ, I feel that it's best to let the developers know, or let the community know, hey, this game has a lot of potential. This game has a lot of really fun, quirky ideas, but because of XYZ, I just can't get through it. So definitely there are a couple chore games on the list. But in my experience, not everything is content. If you're not having fun with it, it's okay to put it down and pick something else up.
Right. And I think it matters too when you're a streamer, whether you want to have your content around you being frustrated or you having fun.
Right. And I think that frustration is just going to go hand in hand when it comes to horror. Even the most polished games, even the most popular games, you're still going to have those moments where you get really stuck on a puzzle or there's a boss you just can't beat. Frustration is definitely going to be a part of horror gaming, streaming, content creating forever. It's been there from the start and it's going to be there till the end. But I think there is a really big difference between getting frustrated and just getting fed up.
I think that that's probably very true about horror games, just because There's a lot that have been inspired from this idea of the classics back in the 90s when the horror genre was being born, and those games were inspired from the idea of this is the technology we have to make our game last long. How do we make such a small amount of content last for a very long time? You either pad it out with levels that say, like, here's a puzzle that you're going to take a very long time to do, or it's going to be very hard, and so when you die, you have to start all the way back to a point that was very far away so that it feels longer. And some horror games haven't realized that technology has advanced and people can make their game bigger. So they're like, well, I remember back when Silent Hill 3 had the Shakespeare puzzle. We should have the Shakespeare puzzle in our video game.
There's always going to be a level of inspiration. And while it is, cute and nostalgic, I definitely agree with you that it does feel a bit repetitive, and repetition is, again, another thing that kind of goes hand in hand with horror. Like you said, it's just a way to stretch out the content and create that kind of anxiety that you want to create within a horror atmosphere. But repetition is a very fine line between, challenging and annoying. And it's definitely really hard to perfect that. And I think a lot of games miss with that. But to be fair, like I said, it's a very hard very hard line to toe.
That was honestly what kind of did it for me with Dead by Daylight.
Yeah.
Because what mixes it up there is, it's a different person trying to kill me as opposed to something else to do in the gameplay loop.
Right.
There are people that I know that I'm very good friends with that have thousands of hours in Dead by Daylight, and I've just kind of been sitting back and like, hey, if they ever come out with a new game mode, I'll be in it. But
yeah,
God, that community is dedicated to exactly what it is.
It is. And it's an interesting journey for me because I played Dead by Daylight when it first released. And it was such a wild experience because it really was just every kind of horror fan coming together and having a place where we could play a game together and experience that fear and that excitement and, the nuance of it all. But it very quickly, again, just became so repetitive. And whilst they are very dedicated to putting out their DLCs and their new killers, it's just, I would really like to see a different trope. Like, we've been through the fix the generators, open the gate, get out. But there's so many different tropes within horror that they could tackle, like getting out of a house, as much as every indie horror developer does that. It's not quite something that DVD has tackled. It would be interesting to throw everybody into a mansion and have to find keys and something of the sort. I think they have a lot of potential, but hey, like you said, they have a community that's very dedicated to what it is. And if they don't have to change anything, then why do it? I just don't think they're feeling that pressure, but they have such potential.
I feel like at this point, if Dead by Daylight tried to insert a new game mode or something, their fans might just crucify them. So
yeah,
I think they have to do it. They have to stay with what they're doing.
Yeah, it's it almost feels like a religion at this point.
Yeah.
And I was in it. I was fully in it for about 2 years, and then I just couldn't take it anymore. But they've got a good thing going, and I guess they're going to keep going with it. But I would really love to challenge a lot of the DVD streamers to try just a little bit more indie horror, just to sprinkle it in. Maybe not necessarily for content, but there is such a level of atmosphere and anxiety that I think Dead by Daylight is just missing because it's so full on all the time with the loud music and the generators and the killer being out there all the time. It's just missing a lot of those quintessential horror elements.
Right. There was something specific I wanted to ask you.
Oh?
Yeah. There was a time ago when I said that I'd hook you up with an emulator so you could play PlayStation 2 games and
Yes.
just play them on your PC. So I did that, and I showed you a site where you can get ROMs, and I never forgot how excited you sounded when you saw Clocktower 3 there.
No.
Um,
The pain.
I wanted to bring that up because it made me realize that you've been doing horror gaming longer than I think a lot of people in your community recognize. And I wanted to tap into that from you. Like, what started you down horror gaming? What were some of the horror games that you played before you were a streamer?
Oh gosh. I'm trying to think. I would like to say that PS2 was definitely the start of the horror journey for me, with the release of Haunting Ground and with the Resident Evil series on there as well. I think that Haunting Ground was really the fire that just kind of sparked everything in my life when it comes to horror. I've played horror all my life. I've watched horror movies all of my life. There was something within Haunting Ground that really just kind of started turning some cogs for me. Albeit I was a little bit young to play such a title, but it was just such a psychosexual experience. And it just instilled a horror in me that I had not previously known. I had a very sheltered upbringing. I was homeschooled. I wasn't allowed to watch SpongeBob. There was so much that was kind of sheltered and hidden from me. But in the video game world, where my parents didn't really know what was going on, I had a little bit more freedom to explore. And I think that just being a little rebel that I am kind of put that fire under me. And I was like, I'm going to learn more. Like, if this is out here, what else is out there? And I just, I don't want to say I got addicted to it, but it was a drive for me to figure out what else was out there and what people were creating and what was driving horror creators and where they were getting their ideas. It was just such a niche little thing that I wasn't allowed to have access to, and it made me want to have it more.
Haunting Ground is a hell of a game to start with.
It really is. And I did not beat it for, I want to say, at least a year or two after I started it, because there's so many elements to that game with the crafting and the alchemy and everything. I mean, it's a hard title, but it really got some cogs turning in my head, and I just was hooked ever since.
It's so memorably horrifying too.
Yes.
Like, in particular, there are scenes in Haunting Ground that are just burned in my head.
Yes.
I don't think I'll ever forget some of the more horrifying moments of that game.
What was one in particular that you can think of?
There's a cutscene where the person who you've known that they're a villain the whole time, and they're revealing themselves to you as being a clone. And it has this kind of unmasking scene, and they do these eyes on this villainous character to be like, oh, this person's insane.
Yeah. They really just took everything that they had and painted such memorizing images within that game. It was a really striking game, and I understand why it had its warnings and was banned in certain countries, but they just did such a striking job with it. It's an unforgettable title for sure.
It makes sense that if that's where you started, why you are very influenced by Clocktower influenced games and just kind of like the whole Clocknesia vibe that exists, you know?
I really want to see more of those titles too, because while they are remaking some of those games, and while we do, thankfully, and thanks to you, have emulators to play them, when I was playing back through Clocktower 3 over the course of the 2 years that it took me to beat it again, I really just realized how many of those elements are so lost in these newer titles. And while titles such as Madison and Visage do bring a new type of anxiety and fear to the game, I'm kind of missing that just wild outside of the box fear that was created in those now what people would call retro games. Like, you just don't see those kind of adversaries anymore, like a man with a giant pair of scissors chasing you through a house. Like, it's just become such a rarity. And while horror, I feel, is becoming more focused on reality and mental illness, like, I just really want a bad guy with a big weapon sometimes.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with a good slasher.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's back to Dead by Daylight. Its biggest appeal is it's a slasher, and that's why I think it's very welcoming to people who normally wouldn't call themselves horror gamers, because slashers have always been a more accessible genre within horror. Slashers are just kind of like very recognized, and you mix that with the fact that they have the recognizable horror movie villains that are slashers, then it's got a lot of attention from people who you can say, oh yeah, you know Dead by Daylight. Well, do you know, well, Clocktower? And I am certain that most of them don't, even though that gameplay idea of complete a task while trying to hide from a villain that you cannot defeat that is out there to capture you is literally taken directly from Clocktower.
Yeah, that's a fair point. But like you said, they put this spin on it where it is slasher focused. And I think that slashers are just so much more easily digestible because there is an element of comedy in some aspect and predictability. And I think that predictability is what comforts people within that horror genre. Whereas some other games, you really don't know what's going to happen when you open a door.
Oh, that just gave me a flashback to Song of Horror.
I was just thinking about Song of Horror, which is another game I have not beaten. Oh, that is a rough one.
I am going to try it again soon.
I'm right there with you.
Those devs, they tricked me. I went to go and play it on easy, and they said, wait, don't play our game on easy. You're gonna miss all the cool features of playing on not easy. And I was like, all right, fine. I'll play it on your standard difficulty. I should have played it on easy. I should
Honestly, if there was a baby mode, I would choose that for sure. That permadeath is no joke.
It's not, and it's not fair either. That's right, I said it. Song of Horror is not fair.
I died jumping out the same window twice. Fantastic game, 11 out of 10.
Well, there's two things that come to mind to complain about in regards to the difficulty that is Song of Horror's permadeath. I remember dying to, I'm going to look at this mirror, and then I got sucked in the mirror and died. And for a game that is built upon the adventure game idea of pixel hunting for items, that shouldn't be allowed, for one. But second, in the room with the mirror was an item that was needed to get to another room. And in that room, there's a note that says, don't look at the mirror. And it's like, screw you. Screw you.
Oh, that's Psych 101. Good Lord. Yeah, that's definitely a title I would like to tackle. I did want to ask you a question.
I'm here for it.
I'm finding a reoccurring theme within myself and within my horror enthusiast friends. Do you find a level of comfortability within the horror genre? Do you find that it's something you turn to when things get hard or when you're stressed? It could be games, movies, music. Do you find that horror is a comfort to you?
Uh, the short answer is yes.
Okay.
There's, I think, a lot of familiarity in a genre that I have grown to love. Because of that, it's easy to immerse myself back into that kind of familiarity. But there's also some horror that's just not going to ease the stress, but will in fact make it worse.
Yeah, for sure. There's also a factor of like desensitization as well. I believe that the things that we are less exposed to and have a general fear of, right, those won't make things better.
Right.
But I found myself quite recently with everything going on returning to some of those cult classic horror movies and playing the same games over again. And I think there's some kind of comfort within the controlled fear and the controlled anxiety. We know when to expect a jump scare. We expect certain characters to die. And I think having that level of control really does create a comfort within some horror medias.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that so I've been speedrunning a lot.
Yes.
And I have, depending on how you count, I either have 2 or 5 world records.
Congrats.
Thank you.
Huge.
There's this idea in the horror games that because I basically only speedrun horror games. I only really play the games that I really loved to play, like casually, going through just, this is a new game, let me play it. Oh, I loved that. And if I enjoyed it, then I might find myself looking up some of the strats, figure out how to run this game, figure out how to do post a competitive time for this.
Yeah.
But then there's games that I absolutely loved that not even a speedrun would be able to desensitize me to how horrifying it is. One of them that comes to mind is the latest Amnesia game, Rebirth.
I was not able to get through that.
I remember
some of the flashing lights and whatnot, but
yeah,
it had a really great concept. I am unlikely to play it. If you would like to talk about your experience, I'd be very interested.
I guess the big spoiler is, as the game starts, you're looking for your character's boyfriend, husband character.
Right.
You do eventually find him pretty early on in the game, and he's dead. You are thrust into this heartbreaking scene of finding your dead lover, and it is gut-wrenching, it is powerful, it is emotional, and I remember how it affected me the first time going through the game. And horror is very good at eliciting some powerful emotions like that.
Yeah.
If you're going to speedrun a game, you have to be comfortable playing that game over 100 times within a short time span, because that's how you practice and get better. I don't think I could take finding my dead lover 100 times.
Right. I think once is probably enough.
Yeah.
Good Lord. I think that Visage was that game for me, which is ironic because Visage is the only game that I've ever thought about wanting to speedrun. Well, I haven't tried it yet. Visage was definitely the game that broke me as a person, as a content creator. I remember pausing the game and I was live and I looked at my chat and I said, I have to go to the bathroom. And I got off my screen and I was still in my stream room and I just sat against the wall with my hands in my covering my face. And it was such a changing moment for me in the horror genre as well as content creation, where I realized that the content that we consume isn't always just for fun or for content. Like, it really does affect us, and it really does affect our viewers and the way that we view things and the way that we feel. And that game was very heavily focused on, addiction and what addiction does to not only yourself but those around you. And it really just hit me to my core like no other game has. And I want to speed run it, but I have that apprehension where I'm like, can I go through this again? It's a big ask, I think.
Before I continue on this thought that I do want to continue touching on of how powerful horror stories can be, I just want to say, if you want to speedrun it, I'll speedrun it with you. It looks like a wild speedrun from what I have seen. And the game looks absolutely busted.
Oh, no.
Like,
maybe that will take away from the emotional impact of it all, then.
There's a lot of teleporting and phasing through walls and such things.
Perfect.
So
my favorite.
It's going to be a hard one to learn, but if you want to do it, I'll do it with you.
I would love to. That would be fantastic to tackle this year.
There's some concepts in horror games that I tend to, if I know what's going to be in the game, I try to be very forthcoming and say, hey, this is content that's this game deals with. It's particularly triggering.
Right.
I couldn't finish Too Dark. I could finish it off stream, but once I realized what the game was about, I was like, oh, I'm not doing this on stream. Which, that game is largely about the villains.
I actually started that game recently, off stream.
Ah, so you know.
Also could not continue playing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is such a shame, too, because it is such a beautifully created game and such a fully realized image of a game. And the inventory system was fantastic. I loved the aesthetic of it, but it just got a little too dark, a little too quick.
Yeah. It hits hard immediately.
It doesn't hold back.
From concepts that are very potentially very close to home, very possible, and with how prevalent topics like Too Dark deal with, it was just something I wasn't comfortable streaming.
Right.
But then there's other things that they are detached from reality, and yet they are horrifying to live in that world that the video game immerses you into. And I think the Amnesia games have always done a good job of doing that. There's certain adventure games. I don't know if you ever played Downfall, the Cat Lady.
Cat Lady, I have played.
Yeah. There's certain ones that just, you can go, oh, hey, there's no major jump scares. There's no hugely unsettling moments of like fast-paced, disturbing gore fest, like, but I would put Cat Lady above any of the most terrifying levels in a Silent Hill and Resident Evil for how much it can impact someone.
It sits with you. It's one of those titles that makes you think. And while the gore and the horror and up in your face kind of stuff can be really good, content wise, and can have that shock factor value, in my opinion, a lot of that shock factor wears off after a couple minutes. It's those psychological themes, those deep rooted themes, those close to home themes that really sit with you and kind of change your perspective on so many different things. It's definitely not a title I will be returning to.
Yeah, that developer just released a new video game recently.
Did they really?
Yeah, and I took a look at it and I was like, oh, it's another one of these.
Oh.
And I appreciate so much the story, the dedication, the attention to detail, and the fact that it is a story worth telling.
Yeah.
It's tough to make good, wholesome content out of.
It is, yeah. I'll have to check that out if that's out.
Yeah, I
That's
think
exciting.
it's.
So when did
I
Cat Lady release? That was, I feel like, ages ago now.
Yeah, it wasn't like a super recent game.
2012. It's been a minute.
Burnhouse Lane, that's what just came out.
Ooh. The
What?
aesthetic is the same. I love this.
Yeah, I'm glad that the aesthetic is remaining. It's still just that right kind of eerie.
Yeah. So exciting.
So now it's time for the Nixuss recommendations.
Ooh.
You first. Tell us, what are those indie titles that we need to look out for?
Suite 776 is the game that I recommend to literally everyone. It is fantastic for beginning horror if you don't have any experience in horror, and it's a fun little title if you are very versed in horror as well. It's not a super well-known game. It is a one-shot horror. There's no save features, so you have to complete it in one sitting. But it does have multiple endings. The atmosphere is fantastic, and it doesn't rely too heavily on cheap jump scares. Obviously, there are a few, but that's kind of what you need when you're first getting into horror as well. So that's always my go-to recommendation. You can't go wrong with Suite 776.
I think it's a good game to, if someone says, never played a horror game, I want to be scared. It's a great suggestion, I think.
And I think that's what a lot of content creators are looking for, especially when they set these goals for subathons or special events. When they say, "We reach this number, I'll play a horror game." They want to get scared because that's what the community wants. So that's always a good recommendation for people that are looking for kind of just a one-off horror to make some content out of.
Absolutely.
As far as enjoyment, that's such a long list. Obviously, Outlast was a really fun time for me. The first one, I was not a fan of the themes in the second, but Outlast was a really wonderful time and really upped the fear factor and the kind of lost and amaze type atmosphere. So that was another really good one. I believe that was the second horror game I ever streamed. But one that stood out to me recently was Remorse the List, which I know you're familiar with.
I speedran it.
I know you did. I'm so proud of you. I had more fun in that game than I wanted to. It was one that I could not put down and would happily play again. It kind of ticked all the boxes for me.
Yeah, it's really inspired from a different horror game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It definitely had those elements of Silent Hill and Cry of Fear.
There it is.
Oh, that gets
there
it is. It's on the list.
One day I will see you complete Cry of Fear, and I will be happy.
I'll celebrate. I'll get a cake.
Ooh, cake. I'll be right over. Yeah.
What about for you for recommendations? Don't say Cry of Fear.
Everybody knows that I recommend Cry of Fear. It's fine. I'll actually, I can come up with another one if you'd like, but I want to second your Remorse the List.
Okay. It's a good one.
I enjoy it. If you like Cry of Fear, you'd probably like Remorse the List. It has very, very similar vibes, but it's on Unity, so it looks a bit nicer. It's also, Cry of Fear has a lot of very heavy topics, and some of them have tended to go over people's heads sometimes, and that's not really the audience's fault. It's the nuances of it aren't entirely obvious on a first playthrough. Remorse is pretty straight to it.
Yeah.
Remorse, there's no question about what's going on in Remorse by the end of the game. Also, if there's any speedrunners listening, please run it. I set a nice little pace, a nice little path. I know that there's more in the game. It's a very fun speed game, and highly recommend that. Let's see, am I recommending indie horror or just horror titles in general?
recommend something that you feel every horror fan should experience.
Oh, wow. Every horror fan should experience.
Like a must play.
I have two answers. One of them is very cliche.
Okay.
And another one I think more horror fans should just know about because it's a masterpiece. And
Ooh.
I haven't really seen horror streamers play it.
Okay.
The cliche one is Silent Hill 2.
Yes. Seconded.
Yeah. And I want to point out Silent Hill 1 should be played. It is also a masterpiece. And I do think that you should play 1 and then play 2. I do think that. But however you want to do it, please play 2.
1 was just so groundbreaking too. I mean, it was such a small team and most of them slept in the office, and it's just such a dedicated piece of art, honestly.
Yeah.
I have so much respect for that game.
I never want to, because a lot of people do, and I think it's a shame. Silent Hill 2 is a masterpiece, but that does not mean that Silent Hill 1 is not. It is.
Right.
It is 100% a masterpiece of a game. And certainly without the success of it, there wouldn't be a 2.
Yeah. Agreed.
I highly recommend people play the original Silent Hill as well. The reason I say specifically 2 is because over the years, through the decades past when it's been out, I don't think that there is a horror game that's been more directly influential via storytelling than Silent Hill 2.
I agree with that. For sure.
And then
the themes alone were so thought-provoking.
Yeah.
Along with the monstrous creatures, and it just had everything. It didn't really shell off or you know, it didn't really leave anything out. Like, they really just put everything they could think of into that game and made it work in such a beautiful way. Ugh, so much respect for that as well.
The other one is an indie title that I checked today. You can get for $8.
Ooh, a bargain.
It's called Heaven Dust. And I like to refer to it as Resident Evil Jr. If you like Resident Evil, the idea of the inventory management, you need to find the sword key or the shield key, you need to solve the puzzle of how many times have you got to push the statue in a certain spot to get the thing unlocked, shooting the zombies, keeping track of your ammo while you do it. If you like all of that, then you will like Heaven Dust. It's that, but much more approachable. If everything that I just said sounds very intimidating, Heaven Dust is a great first step into horror. If you are a scaredy cat, are afraid of getting into horror but are curious about it, Heaven Dust is not very scary. It is very approachable. It is a very easy thing to have as your dip your toes into horror, and it kind of teaches you what the genre is about as far as survival horror goes. It does
graphically, it's very kind.
Yeah, it's very kind graphically.
It definitely eases you in.
It is very approachable, and I think that it is accessible for newcomers and hardcore fans alike. It's not something you go to when you're looking for extreme horror fear, but it doesn't have to be. What it is, it's a very fun game, and I really think that horror fans should play it. It's so good.
I'm putting it on my list.
Yay!
Another one I have to recommend is Palmyra Orphanage. While it is very aggressive with the flashing lights for anybody with photosensitivity, it is a one-of-a-kind adventure, and I highly suggest not skipping the credits.
in case anybody has noticed, you can hear how I list off games that really inspired me, coming from Silent Hill and Resident Evil, and Nixuss naming things that inspired them being Clocktower and I'll say Amnesia, though I don't think that's specifically the inspiration.
Amnesia was one of the games that I could not get through as much as I wanted to, and as much as I wanted to love it, because it was a big driving force for me for getting into content creation with horror. We all watched people play it growing up, I think, to an extent. It was so puzzly, and my little brain just gets so fed up with those things so fast. And I believe that is 100% a user error.
I think that the reason some puzzles that are in like an Amnesia, they make you feel dumb not getting through them, because the puzzles are made to look like they're easy, but they're not.
Right. It's a very simple design.
Yeah.
But it just goes completely over your head at times. It definitely does make you feel a bit inadequate.
Whereas, Resident Evil is just like the complex series of numbers drawn by like Dr. Spencer, who labored over the years, came up with the terrifying conundrum that no people could ever break the code, and then you're supposed to do it.
Yeah, right. Oh, gosh.
And then you do, and you're just like, I did it. I am smarter than everyone in this video game universe.
That's a really hard area to navigate as well. I would assume. I've never developed a game, but making puzzles, there's such a fine line between it being challenging and rewarding and just annoying and making you feel stupid. I definitely don't feel like there's a lot of middle ground there when it comes to puzzles and horror games.
I was hanging out in Beep Salt's stream the other day. Beep Salt is on the GDQ staff and has developed 3 video games before. And they were playing the new game from Harvester Games and was talking about making puzzles in games and how there is a fine line between, I want this game to be so intricate with its puzzles that nobody can just go, I'm tired, I'm just going to push every number and hope that it works.
Right.
But you also don't want it to be on the other side of, this puzzle is so impossible, I'm discouraged from playing the game further.
Yes.
So
I think
that's the fine line.
Souls. Yeah, Tormented Souls did a really good job, in my opinion, with that. There definitely were some puzzles where I was like, this game is impossible. Screw this. But it was really rewarding when you did figure them out. And I never felt for a moment, I just want to close this because I can't figure it out. Like it put a drive in me to think outside of the box and try different things. And I think they did a fantastic job with their puzzles.
Sometimes those puzzles don't know when to stop. And then that's when you get Silent Hill 3's Shakespeare puzzle to bring it all back around.
Oh, Lord. I'm trying to think if there was any kind of puzzle like that within the Resident Evil series. I feel like those are, while challenging at times, they're pretty plain and out there.
Not compared to that. It's hard to find any game with a puzzle like that, honestly.
Yeah, I can't think of anything.
It's significant to point out that Silent Hill 3 came out at a time when the personal computer was only just becoming kind of expected to be in people's homes.
Right.
They expected you to know this stuff about Shakespeare. There was, for most people playing that game at the time, there was not a World Wide Web to look up things to help.
Right.
I bring that up because there's a few games that I've played that have puzzles that harken back to the vibe that was the Shakespeare puzzle in Silent Hill 3. And I really, really enjoyed them because they encourage you to kind of do some research and send you down a kind of internet rabbit hole to start searching for, this riddle said this. What happens if I Google that? Oh, that refers to this. And that's what they want you to do. But Silent Hill 3 doesn't have that excuse.
Yeah, I agree. They really just wanted everyone to have gone to college.
Yeah. It sure felt like that. That was your quick warning to be like, we know that you chose hard puzzles, but we're immediately going to make you regret that decision. Because it's one of the first puzzles in the game.
Yeah. I wonder how many people just stopped there.
I think there's probably a higher percentage of people who went, okay, I'll turn the puzzle down to normal.
Oh, I know that feeling.
There's a few developers that are known for including things in their games that they probably shouldn't have, but they did it because no one was in the room to stop them.
Right. Too much power.
Yeah. And I wonder who it was that was just like,
just slip that in there.
A hard puzzle. Well, I'm sure that our gamers haven't studied Shakespeare as extensively as I have done, so it might be a little bit challenging for them.
They were waiting all their life to use that information, though, and they did, and I'm very happy for them.
Exactly. They did it.
They really did. They didn't hold back.
Outside of horror, Kojima in Metal Gear Solid 3 wanted to have the sniper boss fight last an actual week because he read somewhere that in real life war, snipers will sometimes stay in the same position for days at a time.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
And this absolute madman was just like, that is the kind of realistic experience I want to give gamers. But thankfully, there were people that said, Mr. Kojima, you can't do that.
We're not doing that. Gosh.
He was working on a horror game that I guess he didn't get to work on, but he wanted to do something where the game CD in your console would drip out blood, like fake blood out of your console to add to the horror. And they had to explain the technology is not there, and even if it was, we probably shouldn't do that.
Somebody would get sued.
Yeah.
100%.
But he wanted to. That man wanted to.
He could have done like a special release with a disclaimer. Oh, that would have been something.
Sometimes I wonder how many things got put in games that were like they were considered for the cutting room floor and they probably should have gone there. And how many things we played in games where they were cut because they were just too wild.
Right.
Far more ambitious than they should have been.
Ugh. I would love to see those ideas realized, though.
There's some indie game out there, not horror, but it takes 400 days to complete.
Oh my, there's no way.
It just counts down from 400 days, and
oh my gosh,
it gives you little mini games to play in the meantime. You can just leave it on and let it go, but a lot of people tried to, because it's tied to your in-game clock on your PC.
Oh.
So a lot of people did little things where they would adjust the in-game clock to make it go forward. But the game is programmed to expect that. And if you do that, you'll go in and you're locked in a cell and you can't get out until you press the button that says, I'm sorry, 400 times.
That is fantastic. What a good use of somebody's time and skills.
Yeah.
Oh my lord.
Like,
Oh,
there's things like that, and I wonder how many AAA developers wanted to do some shit like that, and somebody came in and was just like, listen, I told the CEO what you're planning on doing. He is not happy with you.
oh no. How many HR meetings have there been? Ugh. Something I really want to see in the genre more of. I really, really want more full motion video game. I really do. And that's not something I thought I would ever be into. But At Dead of Night really flipped that switch for me. And I played one similar. It wasn't as horror based. It was definitely had those horror elements. It was a bit more of a thriller. I believe it was called Emma or something to that effect. But yeah, I really do hope we get more FMV video games, horror video games in the future. I'm not sure. Did you play that one at Dead of Night?
I tried to. That one made me a little bit motion sick, sadly.
Okay, understandable. Yeah, the turning was not fully optimized for sure.
It's a cool idea though. I really appreciated the idea of we can make a horror game with a camcorder kind of thing.
Yeah. Erica was the other one I was thinking of.
Okay.
Erica's a good one. You might like that one. There's some cool themes in that.
I'm always looking for horror games to give a shot to.
I think the thing I enjoyed most was the point and click. I feel like I'm really missing that type of horror these days. There was another one on my list.
Is it Realms of the Haunting? I bought it for you.
Wait, did you really?
I did. It should be in your library if you accept it.
That's right. We were talking about that. Realms of the Haunting. I'm going to download that now before I forget.
Heck yeah.
But it was oh gosh, where is it? Decay the Mare.
I have it. I haven't played it yet.
I would love to see you go through that. It is a point and click. I could not get through it because it was too puzzly. So if you could take the torch and beat it so I could see it, that would be fantastic.
No, I do love a good puzzle. Challenge accepted.
Yeah, I think you would enjoy that one a lot. That's a really fun one.
Not FMV, but if you're looking for a good point and click to get into, I do recommend The Lost Crown. It's an adventure game, so there's a lot of walking through town, talking with people, finding things in the ground, clicking it, and stuff like that. It's slow paced, it's slow burn, but oh my god, when it gets creepy, it gets creepy.
Yeah, this aesthetic it's very intense.
It is a ghost hunting game, so it's a point and click where you like have seances and sit in corners of room and pull out the EMF meter and set up your cameras and stuff like that.
Oh, that's fun.
Like I said, it takes a bit to get there because they're kind of putting you in this setting, this mysterious town that you're kind of stranded in with a bunch of mysterious characters that aren't who they claim to be. So it's an investigative game at the same time. It's an interesting one. I've been watching my partner go through it, and I really, really recommend it to people who are looking for adventure point and clicks that are well founded in horror.
Okay. Phantasmagoria was point and click, was it not?
Yeah, it was.
I thought so. I haven't played that in so long, but that was another one of the early games that got me into the genre. I'd love to replay through that.
If you like that, you should also play Harvester if you haven't.
I haven't. Harvester is on my list though.
Yeah,
that looks fantastic.
FMV from back in the day.
So many games, so little time.
It is unfortunate.
The ratio here.
I think it's a pity that a lot of people look at the horror genre and they go, yes, there's Dead Space, Resident Evil, Silent Hill, and there's Amnesia, and there's Outlast, and God, there's so many things out there that aren't remotely like any of those big games. So much in horror.
And so thought-provoking too.
Mm-hmm.
Like the themes and the way that they delve into real fear and trauma, while it can be triggering, it is just so mind-blowing at times and really does put a lot of things into perspective. And I feel like a lot of people miss those opportunities to explore themselves and find what really instills fear in them and to face that and tackle it. And I think that horror is a great way to explore yourself and expand yourself and heal yourself too, in a way. And I feel like a lot of people miss those titles that are really just kind of life-changing.
Yeah, I like that. I like what you said.
Thanks, I said it myself.
It's always worth pointing out the thought-provoking nature of some of the best horror out there, because I think a lot of people expect that horror is simply a story to tell something with shock value, something to scare the person who's playing it, watching it, whatever. And that's where its complexity ends. Immediately, I think of some games that really made me want to have a discussion about just that game and the one game alone. I think for me, Soma fits into that category. I think I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream has always fit into that category.
Yeah, Soma's one I still haven't gotten through as well, but I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream was very eye-opening.
Yeah, that's one that always stays with you.
Yeah. I feel like I blocked some of that game out. I need to revisit that one as
possible.
Well. Ooh.
Also, we mentioned Cat Lady. I mentioned Downfall. But even outside of the emotional stuff that's there, even some games are just thought-provoking in a way that's just fun to think about, because Daniel Mullins with his Pony Island, you know, and more recently Inscription. My God, you can look up videos that people have made analyzing Inscription that go on for hours, and it's not like it's introducing some deep philosophical question or something that thinkers will ponder on forever. It's just very complex, and there's a lot to decipher in there, and frankly, that's just fun to do.
Yeah, I've got to get back to Soma at some point.
Well, look, let's start with Cry of Fear.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. That's very fair. Cry of Fear, then Soma. That's a good timeline. Little Nightmares was actually one that unexpectedly kind of got me emotionally and got me thinking, and both 1 and 2 I felt told a very compelling story and really made me think and feel as if, you know, I was making those decisions or if I was in that situation. And I connected to the characters, which seems a bit odd given how simplistic they were and there really wasn't any dialogue going on, but that was a game that kind of stuck with me and made me think a little bit more than I expected it to, for sure.
I think that the Little Nightmares games do a good job of getting you attached to their characters, because the game is immersive enough to make you feel like you're experiencing this along with who you're playing as, which is why when your character does something shocking, it shocks you, because up until that point, you have been that character.
I think another one that comes to mind too is Devotion. I don't know if you played that one.
I have, yeah.
Yeah, that one really, I'm sure it's a number of things, but I connected with that game very deeply. My father was born in the Philippines, and while they are different cultures, a lot of the themes were very on point, and a lot of the, stresses that come with an Asian upbringing and that kind of pressure and whatnot. That was a game that really stuck with me, and really, it had a beautiful ending too. As messed up as it was just a really, really well thought out game, and it really did touch on the stress of providing for a family and the stress of growing up and trying to live to expectations. And it was a really, really well done game. That one definitely, I think if you're looking for something thought provoking, that's got a lot to say.
I agree. And Steam, put it on your store. Don't be cowards.
Yeah, come on. It's just silly sauce.
Mm-hmm.
But you can get it on Red Candle Games website, so there's that.
Indeed. They also did Detention, I believe.
I have not played that, but it looks fantastic.
It's pretty good. It is pretty good.
Okay.
Let's see. Coming down to the end of our time, Nixuss, is there any last thought that you wanted to mention before we close out our discussion of horror?
I think that it's a little disclaimer that I kind of sprinkle in anywhere I can, is just to be mindful of the content that you're consuming. And while we do love horror and we eat, live, and breathe horror, it does do something to your body. Fear is a natural response, and what it will do is shut down a lot of your other bodily functions and focus on your adrenaline and what you need to survive. So it can cause brain fog, it can cause digestive issues, things like that. So always just be mindful of what you're consuming. As much as you love it, definitely take things in stride and make sure that you're focusing on that mental and physical health aspect as well.
I appreciate you saying that because one, I think that it's not talked about enough in horror circles. And two, we're sacrificing for you out there as horror content creators.
We are. My heart. It is not for the faint of heart at all.
Alrighty then. Nixuss, you're such a good friend. You're a very big inspiration to me. I'm so blessed and happy to have you in my life. Thank you for coming on here and doing this podcast with me.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for being such a good friend and helping me find myself and treating me with the same love and respect from day one. I appreciate you so much.
Of course, of course. Appreciate you too. All right, everyone, that is going to be the end of the podcast today. I will see you on the next one. Take care and goodbye.
Make good choices.
Do that too.